Hello everyone, Namaste. First of all, I would like to thank HinduPACT for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this event. I'm starting my performance with Ganesh Vandana.
Namaste. Shall I sing? Okay. गणनायकाय गणदैवताय गणाध्यक्षाय धीमहि गुणशरीराय गुणमण्डिताय गुणेशानाय धीमहि गुणातीताय गुणाधीशाय गुणप्रविष्टाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि गानचतुराय गानप्राणाय गानान्तरात्मने गानोत्सुकाय गानमत्ताय गानोत्सुकमनसे गुरुपूजिताय गुरुदैवताय गुरुकुलस्थायिने गुरुविक्रमाय गुह्यप्रवराय गुरवे गुणगुरवे गुरुदैत्यगलच्छेत्रे गुरुधर्म सदाराध्याय गुरुपुत्र परित्रात्रे गुरुपाखण्ड खण्डकाय गीतसाराय गीततत्त्वाय गीतगोत्राय धीमहि गूढगुल्फाय गन्धमत्ताय गोजयप्रदाय धीमहि गुणातीताय गुणाधीशाय गुणप्रविष्टाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि ग्रन्थगीताय ग्रन्थगेयाय ग्रन्थान्तरात्मने गीतलीनाय गीताश्रयाय गीतवाद्यपटवे गेयचरिताय गायकवराय गन्धर्वप्रियकृते गायकादीन विग्रहाय गङ्गाजल प्रणयवते गौरीस्थनन्दनाय गौरीहृदयनन्दनाय गौरभानुसुताय गौरीलजेश्वराय गौरीप्रणयाय गौरीप्रवणाय गौरभावाय धीमहि गोसहस्राय गोवर्धनाय गोपगोपाय धीमहि गुणातीताय गुणाधीशाय गुणप्रविष्टाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि एकदन्ताय वक्रतुण्डाय गौरीतनयाय धीमहि गजेशानाय भालचन्द्राय श्रीगणेशाय धीमहि थैंक यू धन्यवाद
Thank you. Thank you, Geetika ji. That was beautiful. Namaste all, and thank you all for being here today for HinduPACT's Gala. We're working towards a strong Hindu-American voice in the public square. My name is Ankur Patel, and I serve currently as the Director of Advancement for Hindu University of America, HUA, and work as a public school teacher here in Los Angeles. I'm also the volunteer Director of Partnerships for HinduPACT. As Hindus, we have a diverse range of experiences, backgrounds, and of course, political perspectives. And as Hindu Dharma is inclusive, HinduPACT is inclusive and welcoming to all Hindus, from socialists to conservatives, and however you want to label yourself. Thank you all for joining us today. HinduPACT is an important initiative, and I'm proud to be part of the work, elevating the Dharmic Hindu voice in public spaces. We plan to partner with community organizations that range from those giving voice to the underprivileged, to those protecting the environment, as well as those who seek to preserve the freedoms guaranteed by our Constitution. As the Director of Partnerships, please reach out to me with your ideas for partnerships. Again, I'm Ankur Patel, and as a Hindu born and raised in Los Angeles, I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of wonderful and amazing people. It's now my pleasure to introduce our MC for the event, the talented and powerful Priti Upala. Priti was born in Dubai, but raised in Australia, and I know her to be a proud Hindu American. She is a former Hindu American, Hindu citizen of the world. She's a former investment banker turned thought leader and media entrepreneur, now based in Hollywood, California. She works as a geopolitical expert, award-winning international columnist, and is the director of the Omnia Institute. The former Miss India International hosts a popular news show called The Priti Experience. She's a professional speaker and a certified Dharma ambassador. She has spoken at many global platforms on the topics of Sanatan Dharma, feminism, soft power, and Indian philosophy. She speaks 5 languages, and her literary work has been translated into several languages. Her book on Indic feminism will be released in 2021. And as someone who has traveled to over 100 countries, she calls herself a citizen of the world, yet a Sanatani in spirit. Priti?
Namaste, everyone. I am truly honored to be a part of this amazing, wonderful event and to be your host this evening. All the powers in the universe are already ours. It is we who choose to cover our eyes and then cry that it is dark. Swami Vivekananda. Namaste again. Why are we all here this evening? There are almost 6 million Hindus in America, and we certainly have a lot to be proud of. We are model citizens and an example of where immigration has got it right. We are the most educated and one of the wealthiest religious groups in the great country of the United States. We have made immeasurable contributions to the American society for generations, starting from Henry David Thoreau's commentary in Massachusetts that was informed by the Bhagavad Gita to the introduction of Indian spirituality through the Beatles, Ravi Shankar, Paramahansa Yogananda, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, Srila Prabhupada, Osho, Art of Living, Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and so many others. Today, almost 25 million Americans have adopted Hindu practices openly, such as yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, vegetarianism, ahimsa, kirtan, pranayama, and even reincarnation. And yet, there is a rise in Hindu phobia, in anti-India and anti-Hindu bigotry specifically. Hate crime against Hindus is on the rise. Vandalism of our places of worship and temples is on the rise. And there seems to be a very calculated, specific targeting of Hindu candidates who are running in the political arena. Our religion has somehow become weaponized and politicized by subversive elements in the political spectrum, and we find ourselves suddenly with far fewer allies and lesser agency than we really ought to. And where we have failed miserably is in the area of political advocacy and agency. The Hindu cause has been marginalized by geopolitical forces that seek to fragment the community into intersectionalities and ensure that Congress does not address our specific needs and concerns. There is hope, though. The silver lining for us, fortunately, is that we have organizations that do fight for our cause. One such organization is the amazing Vishwa Hindu Parishad America, the VHPA. The VHPA has been working since 1970 to provide a forum that addresses Hindu interests in the USA, eradicate misconceptions about Hinduism, and finally, and most importantly, to educate the next generation about the great values as envisaged by our ancient rishis on how to be perfect world citizens or perfect citizens for their adopted new country, as well as the whole world at large. This is done in 4 different ways: through prachar, raising awareness; seva, serving the community; samskara, cultivating Hindu values; and finally sampark, which is networking. The latest initiative of the VHPA is called the HinduPACT. The HinduPACT is an advocacy and policy research group designed to protect Hindu American constitutional and civil rights, honor the contribution of the Hindu community, and most importantly, create a safe environment for our growth and prosperity. Today, we find ourselves in a very precarious political situation. If we don't do something now, it may be too late. The bus may have already left the station. There needs to be an honest conversation on why we are where we are. What is actually going on within the diaspora as well as out there in the US political arena. All of this affects you and your family, whether you think it does or not. So I thank you all for being here for this incredibly important cause. I do hope you have an amazing evening full of discussion and you come away inspired with great thoughts and feelings, and of course, actions that you can go forward with. And most importantly, I hope that you donate from your hearts and that we all come together and raise the desired funds that is required for this amazing initiative to manifest. So I thank you again for having me as your host. And again, namaste. I would now like to call on our first guest for this evening, Dr. Jay Bansal. Dr. Jay Bansal is a recognized expert in the field of efficient utilization of hydrocarbon resources. As a distinguished fellow at the Argonne National Laboratory in Chicago, he has been an advisor to both Argonne scientists as well as the US Department of Energy. Dr. Bansal has almost 4 decades of experience in the global petrochemical industry and in 2014 retired as the Chief Scientific Officer as well as the Global Product Development Advisor. He has been published widely, keynoted at numerous international conferences, and holds over 24 patents, including one which was nominated for the Most Valuable Patent Award. Dr. Bansal now dedicates his time completely to the service of Hindu community through organizations such as the VHPA, and has been instrumental in organizing 2 highly successful conferences. One is the Threads in Boston in 2019 and Reflections at 50, the virtual conference in September 2020. Currently, he also serves as a member of the VHPA Governing Council as well as its Executive Director of Education. So it's my pleasure to invite Dr. Jay Bansal.
Namaste. Thank you, Preeti ji. Thank you for the kind introduction. And also thank you for very beautifully framing the discussion that we're going to have this evening. Over the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to share my screen first. So over the next 10 minutes or so, my task is to talk about Hindu advocacy in America, why we need where we are and why we need to grow our footprint in this arena, and what our organization, the World Hindu Council of America, or the VHPA, is doing to get us there. So America and Hindu thought systems have a long history together. In fact, history going back to the early 1800s, as Preeti ji actually pointed out in her preamble. Since that time, many dharmic teachers came here and exposed the American society to ideas that were utterly alien to their culture. Be it the Vedantic movement of Swami Vivekananda, the self-realization movement of Yogananda, or Maharishi's transcendental meditation, various teachers introducing yoga, Ayurveda, or Srila Prabhupada's ISKCON movement, and so on. These ideas were radically different from what the American society had been used to. And yet, they accepted these ideas with open arms. Here I'm reminded of what Phil Goldberg, the well-known author of the American Veda, actually observed. He jokingly said that Americans may be dreamers, but they're actually hard-headed realists at the core. Whether it is falafel or philosophy, they embrace foreign products as long as the circumstances are right and as long as the products work. Now, I don't know about the falafel part, but surely the Hindu philosophy must have worked for a lot of people because those of us who grew up in the 1960s and 70s in this country know fully well the legions of young Americans taking to Hindu thought system with a gusto. And the movements, the thought movements that were started by the various gurus in this country continue on and are sustained to this day in a big way. So this welcoming ambience that was created for the Hindu idea was also extended to the Hindus as they started coming in large numbers after the Immigration Act of 1965. And this great marriage of Hindu ideas and Hindus and the American society really worked to the advantage of both sides. It created a win-win relationship. Hindus clearly benefited in terms of financial security, in terms of the professional achievements that they have been able to make in this country, and get a sense of belonging. And all that can be encapsulated by saying they were able to achieve their so-called American dream at a very rapid rate. America, on the other hand, gained a deeply law-abiding citizenry and benefited from the strong contribution to the intellectual, material, and creative wealth of the nation. Now, this has been great, but let's not pretend that everything was perfect. There has been some ugliness that reared its ugly head every so often throughout the history. You see some of these images, very insulting images, where our deities or religious symbols were portrayed in very insulting light. But mostly these were disjointed efforts. There was no strong organization behind them. They were not one-off things, and they were very easily managed by simply contacting the offending parties, and they usually backed off. However, things have changed, and the change can be felt very much in the air. The pace and the severity of attacks on our value system, on our deities, on our icons of identity has picked up pace a great deal in the last year or so. And to boot, the sources that this is coming from appear to be well organized and have very deep pockets. Now, we have listed here a number of just examples, and I don't have the time to read through every example, but the reality is that it is becoming very difficult for Hindus to openly profess their identity in schools, in colleges, in workplace, and for that matter, in social settings as well. Now, this is something that is very concerning. Winston Churchill, so how are we going to respond to this? So I'm reminded of what Winston Churchill said one time about Hindus. He said, whenever there is a possibility of an argument, certain communities immediately begin to sharpen their swords. What do Hindus do? They begin to sharpen their argument. For once, he was right about Hindus. That is the Hindu way. That is how we're going to respond to this rising tide of ugliness and nastiness. So on the next slide, I'm going to, we show here the various elements of advocacy that VHPA is engaged in. For the longest time, of course, being the oldest Hindu organization in America, we have always prided ourselves as being the voice of Hindus in America. And we have had an ongoing advocacy effort for a long time. One under the umbrella of AHAD, which stands for American Hindus Against Defamation. This is an effort that has been fighting some of these one-off Hinduphobia issues. However, in response to the rising tide of recent nastiness, we have introduced new initiatives, particularly HinduPACT, which of course is the topic of conversation today. We're also going to talk about Hindu Lounge, which is a weekly event where conversations take place online about issues of Hindu interest to Hindus here, and Hindu Vote, which is an initiative to enlighten our Hindu community about the political process and the electoral process and engage them with the political process. So let me briefly share with you, and of course we are aware of many sister organizations that are operating in this space and doing a great job of representing Hindu interests. We're always open to partnership with them, as Ankurji pointed out, and always willing to share ideas, share strategies and tactics as as appropriate. So let me briefly talk about what HinduPACT is all about. So it stands for Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective. How you get from that to the acronym, I'll let you do that exercise in your own time. But let me briefly share the strategic objectives of this organization. We wish to become the voice of Hindus in America. We would like to identify and influence issues of interest to Hindus, conduct research and publish policy papers, train Hindus on advocacy, and engage them in the electoral process and represent their views to public officials. And of course, as I said earlier, we're always willing to join hands with organizations who share our values. In terms of some of the areas of activity that we are engaged in and are planning to engage in are shown here. So, for instance, policy research, media and public relations, grassroots organizing, political education, advocacy, and of course, partnership, which has featured a couple of times already. So this initiative has been placed only for about 6 months now, and yet we have a great deal of accomplishments during these 6 months. In fact, we can talk about the whole year 2020 that we'd like to share with you. There are a lot of things that we could talk about, but reality is, in the short, given the shortness of time, I'll just highlight a couple of things. So here is Hindu Lounge. So as I said earlier, this is a weekly show on contemporary American Hindu issues, and it's broadcast on multiple channels. AHAD is our initiative that's been there for a long time, fighting Hinduphobia in all its forms. And I'll just point to one or two items here. The New York State legislation had an effort to declare swastika as a symbol of hate, and we organized a very large effort to fight that. It seems to be on hold. Where it goes from here, we wait and see. But that was one of the very significant activities we undertook in this year. Papa John was trying to sell one of their products using yoga in a very insulting way, and we were able to stop that. And again, I think I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. There are much more on this page here. HinduPACT has done a great deal in spite of its, being only here for 6 months. We protested Hinduphobic anti-CAA resolution in 4 cities already. There have been press releases on issues like George Floyd, death of George Floyd, and appeal for racial justice and racial harmony. We've organized a number of symposia on Kashmir issue in conjunction with our other partners. And we have had a number of television appearances, newspaper articles, web interviews, and so on and so forth. And Hindu Vote was very active prior to the general elections this year. We had a very significant voter education effort going into the elections. We also try to obtain the viewpoints of the various primary candidates on Hindu-centric issues. And you can read the rest, but there is a lot here that we have been able to accomplish even in the short span of 6 months. And there's much more to do, of course. So here is, in a nutshell, the organization that we currently have. The effort is headed by Ajay Shaji. He's the convener of this activity. We have Utsav Chakravarti, who is the executive director of this effort. Rakhi, who you'll be hearing from very soon, looks after the legal aspects. Renu Gupta ji, you'll be hearing from her also shortly. She is working to build chapters around the nation. And Ankur ji, you heard from, he is the director of partnership. And I have the responsibility of education. So the point I want to make about this organization is up to this point, it's all volunteer effort. However, given the enormity of the task, a volunteer only model is not going to be long term sustainable. We have to have hired staff who can look after day-to-day stuff and actually carry the operations on a regular basis. We need professional staff as well as student interns. So here, I think the challenge is up to the community to say how they value this effort and how they're going to support it. We clearly have stated the goal very clearly, but a goal without a plan is simply a wish. We have a clear plan, but a plan without resource is nothing but a piece of paper. So now we need to fund that plan, and I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bansal, for that invigorating discussion and for sharing the knowledge. Uh, Much appreciated. I would now like to call on two very special speakers that will address some very interesting and timely topics for our community, Utsav Chakraborty and Ajay Shahji. Utsav Chakraborty is an architect by profession and has been presenting the case of uh, Hindu and subaltern communities to thought leaders in Washington, D.C. for more than 18 years. An astute observer of geopolitical trends inside the Washington Beltway, his work has been presented to lawmakers at Capitol Hill, as well as to representatives of the Human Rights Commission at the United Nations. He's currently volunteering as the executive director of HinduPACT. Utsav's interest in geopolitics, socio-political movements, and religions stem from his exposure to the history of architecture, the built environment, and its impact on peoples and civilization. Ajay Shah ji is someone who needs no introduction. He has been involved in Hindu advocacy for many decades. He works closely with VHPA. He's the current vice president and the incoming next president, and will be closely working with the HinduPACT. So I would like to invite both of them on stage. And while they're doing that, I will quickly want to just mention the media partners for this evening's program. It's Diya TV, diyaTVUSA.com, Tag TV, tagtv.info, and Bharat FM, bharatfm.com. So Utsav ji and Ajay Shah ji, would you like to take the stage?
Yes. Namaste. So hopefully our video is coming through. Thank you very much, PTG. I really appreciate your introductions. And we are somewhat of a last minute step in because we did get a message from Tulsi ji that due to some personal reasons that came up just moments ago, she will not be able to make it. I know that a lot of people have joined this webinar in anticipation of Tulsi ji being here, and we like to apologize. We hope that we don't disappoint you. We have an awesome panel that is coming up after Utsav and I to just talk a little bit about some of the current and contemporary American Hindu issues. So with profound apologies for Tulsi Gabbard, Representative Gabbard not being here today. Utsav ji and I would like to just highlight some of the American Hindu issues that have come up just in recent times. And I want to just take up from where, so first of all, we do this every week. So we do this as part of Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge comes live every week at 11 o'clock Eastern on Sundays. So I can just say, I want to keep this program as casual as possible. I can just say that uh, we are talking heads. We talk all the time, and Utsav and I spend a countless number of hours, discussing Hindu issues and working on American Hindu issues. So we hope that we can do we can be worthy of your time as you are here. So I want to go back a little bit, just last 6 months, and I want to give you an overview of what is happening to Hindus in America. When a state of California comes up and goes and sues a private company and says that there is a caste discrimination going on in this company, when there is a university as prominent as Brandeis bringing up the caste issues, okay. Now take an example of Dr. Gonder, who was appointed by Biden, and she got attacked for using her last name. Look, no, none of us, okay, none of us is for caste-based discrimination. None of us is for anything related, any kind of a discrimination. We have spoken out about the Black Lives Matter, and we have said that there should be no racial discrimination. We are for gender equality. We are for all kinds of, our dharma teaches us to be equal. And here we come across where there's a concerted effort that, hey, if you're a Hindu, don't use your Hindu last name. There are attacks on Hindus for being a part. There was a group of 5 Hindus who started an organization in the state of Washington. And they put up a first seminar that talked about the condition of Hindu minorities in Indian subcontinent. And 140 organizations got together and proposed a resolution in Seattle City Council to make the city council pass a resolution to condemn this organization by name. Okay, that the only crime, if you will, they committed was that they talked about Hindus in Indian subcontinents who are minorities. You go city after city is passing these resolutions that are Hindu phobic. You take that and you combine it with the ridicule that Hindus face, whether it is a beef-laden taco product doing yoga or beheading of Hindu murtis at a restaurant in Santa Fe. And you can see that you want to, and there are presidential campaigns. So let me go back and say the presidential campaigns that come back that say that we will bracket Hindus with Indians and Indians with South Asians and effectively eliminate or erase the identity of Hindus. Okay, this is what is happening to Hindus in America. On one hand, Hindu symbols, Hindu icons, Hindu identity is on attack. On the other hand, the dharma is on attack when it comes to textbook. And I would like to now bring on Utsav Chakrabarti, who is an astute observer of these things and a very articulate speaker. Please, Utsav, your views.
Well, thank you, Ajay Bhai. And this is an ad hoc improvisation that we are here today. Unfortunately, Tulsi couldn't make it tonight because of an emergency. We do hope that we will hear from her at some other time, because she is a leading light and a very strong Hindu community member, as much as she was, and she continues to be a member of the US House. So I would say that what you mentioned, Ajay Bhai, and before that, what Dr. Bansal mentioned, these are issues that are problems of the day that we have to deal with. And I also want to add that, these are the days of intersectionality. The challenge that we face is that the intersectional politics of today actually is working against us, because other identities that were far more stronger, could be the South Asian identity, the brown, the people of color, the Islamic identity, those identities are enveloping us using intersectionality. And at one point, we are reaching a place where we are becoming the punching bag. And the irony here is that it's our next generation that is actually going to be punching us if we continue to go down the road that we are going. So it is very critical that we keep our heads sane, and come together with a very diligent, well thought out strategic, as well as a outgoing plan that gives us a voice at the public square. And that's why we are here today. And even though we couldn't hear from Tulsi, but I would urge everybody, the all 208 of you who are here on this as part of this program, and the thousands of other people who are listening us through our partner channels, that we need to come together and we need to find a place and a voice in the public square. And that's why we are having this event.
So then let me ask you this question, like I always do on Sundays. Let me ask you this question: if you look at the public arena, and you see that in many places, people with Hindu names are getting elected. There are people in Congress. They have a samosa caucus, right? And now there's a vice president who got elected, who has, who traces back her ancestry to Hindu Dharma. And there are other people, there are at local level and state level, more and more Hindus are getting elected. So things must be really going well, right?
Well, just to give you an example of how well things are going, we Hindus, as we all just discussed, are a big portion. In fact, most of the Hindus in America are immigrants. Yet, just a couple of days ago, there was a meeting by the new administration, the administration that's going to be coming next, to involve different religious communities to talk about immigration. Guess who were missing from the table? The Hindu community. So here is a community which is largely an immigrant community in the United States, missing from the table of conversation on immigration, where every other religious community has been invited. So I'm pretty sure with the identities that you just mentioned and the names you just mentioned, it's going pretty well for us. I'm being certain.
And yet there was not there was not even a whimper when it really came to the desecration of the statue of Mahatma Gandhi right across from the Indian embassy, right? I mean, there were some scattered voices, but I didn't hear any of the elected Hindu representatives talk about the desecration of the Mahatma Gandhi statue. Why is that? It was the second time in last 6 months that has happened.
It was the second time in the last 6 months when Mahatma Gandhi's statue was desecrated in front of the Indian embassy on federal land in Washington, D.C. So the federal land part is very important here because it is an American property. Because, as I said in my conversation before, we don't have a place in the public square. We do believe that that is the reason why we are not heard. And the bigger problem than the challenge that we are facing is that the young American Hindus, I'm pretty sure many of them are listening to us today, they are finding it harder and harder to be proud Hindus in the American social sphere, because that's the level of hatred and misinformation that is directed against Hindus, even though we are a community that is probably doing very well and has been doing very well for the rest of the communities in America. It's a community that is very peace-loving. It's a community that has contributed one of the highest number of tax dollars to the American society as taxpayers. So that is something we have to think about. And I'm being very plain here. I don't want to mince words. Tonight is not the time to mince words or be politically correct on either side. So I'm just going to be saying it that we are missing from the table of conversation here.
So that, as we come to a close, I will just say one last thing, and that is the Hindu community is really watching the people who are elected representatives. And what we have seen so far in Congress, for most parts, has disappointed us. For most part, the elected Hindu representatives or representatives with Hindu names have not stood up for the Hindus in America. In fact, some of them have joined the Pakistani caucus, and that does not serve the Hindu community well. When the Hindus who are defending our Dharma Bhumi, this is indeed our Karma Bhumi, and we are focused on America, but India is our Dharma Bhumi. When people who are protecting our Dharma Bhumi are killed in terrorism, or the soldiers who are protecting our Dharma Bhumi are killed in firings, random firings, when one of the representatives or a few of the representatives who have the Hindu name goes and joins the Pakistani caucus, does not bode well. And I think these are the challenges that the Hindu community has to, has to face in America and has to counter. And that is the reason for existence of HinduPACT. Utsada, you get the last word.
Well, thank you. And I will hopefully have the last word at the end of the program as was planned, because I have thought out and written down what I wanted to say at the end of the evening today. But for now, my last word would be that we need to shape up. And this is why we are here today. I mean, we are at a place where we have to address a certain area of the political spectrum. There are other Hindu organizations that are taking care of issues that are very important to Hindus, but they cannot cover the entire ideological spectrum in American politics. So HinduPACT has a specific role, a specific strategy, and a future advocacy program that will address a big section of the spectrum of ideology that we are missing from. And that's where I think I will leave it for now. There are very good events coming up over the next hour, and I will see you all at the end of the evening when I have something to say.
All right. Thank you, Utsada. And back to you, Preeti.
Thank you both, Utsav and Ajay, for that. Before we proceed, I think we have some exciting personal reflections videos to share with all of you. So while those videos are being readied, I guess, to be showcased, I just want to read out the bios for the two amazing videos that we have. First one is Dr. Abhaya Asthana. Dr. Abhaya Asthana is the president of the World Hindu Council of America. He is a fellow at Nokia Bell Labs, CTO, directing research in cognitive, self-reliable networks of the future, networks that are continuously learning on their own and healing themselves. Earlier, he led the design of the VLSI processors at Intel. He got his bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from IIT Kanpur, where he went back to teach from 1983 to 1985. Outside of science and technology, his passion is to learn about Hindu dharma and history, practice it, and pass it on to the future generations. His mission is to help Hindus living in America remain Hindus, and through their lives contribute to the richness of their adopted land. So here is his video.
Namaste. It is an honor to be with you at this gala event for HinduPACT. Over the years, we have noticed that there isn't a significant involvement of Hindu Americans in the national discourse. And this gap is the genesis for HinduPACT, a multifaceted initiative of the World Hindu Council of America, VHPA. On one hand, HinduPACT is a policy research initiative to partner with practicing Hindu scholars, gurus, community organizers to study issues facing the American society and offer views based on dharmic principles. On the other hand, it is an advocacy initiative to formulate Hindu views on contemporary American issues without taking partisan political stand. Thirdly, it is a political education initiative to educate voters, engage them, and increase voter registration. Being a grassroots effort, HinduPACT aims to identify and influence issues of interest to Hindus at all levels, train Hindus for grassroots advocacy, and create advocacy internship opportunities for Hindu youth. We value collaboration and seek to partner with community organizers, government officials, civil rights, and civil society organizations who share our values. Since its inception at the start of 2020, the team has made significant strides even during the pandemic times. My best wishes to the team and my sincere appeal to all of you to join and support with ideas and finances this important initiative. Hari Om.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Astana. And for the next video, we have the amazing Vedananda ji. Padma Bhushan Professor Vedananda serves as the chairman of the board of Hindu University of America and Sar Sangchalak of HSS in America. Dr. Nanda is a professor of law at Sturm College of Law, University of Denver, and serves as Director Emeritus of the International Legal Studies program there. In 2006, Professor Nanda was honored with the founding of the Nanda Center of International Law. He has served as Vice Provost at the University of Denver from 1994 to 2008. He holds or has held numerous official posts in international, regional, and national professional and civil society organizations. He's widely published, having authored and co-authored 24 books in various fields of international law. Professor Vedananda has also received a number of awards, including the Gandhi King Aikida Award for Community Peace Building. So here is the reflections video for Vedananda ji.
I am deeply honored to pay special tribute to HinduPACT on this very, very special occasion. This celebration is exceedingly important because a robust, powerful Hindu voice in this country is sorely needed. A country that at the present time is suffering from intolerance, suffering from lack of respect for each other, and that is what Hindu values are, that's what HinduPACT teaches, and my special tribute to them, and I am deeply grateful to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much to you both. My next speaker that I would like to introduce is Renu Gupta ji. Renu Gupta manages a family-owned franchise business in Detroit, which employs over 90 employees. She has been very active in social organizations. She has served on the ACL board and was the first woman chairperson of the ACL board. She has been actively involved in VHPA from the last 35 years and is currently serving as the VP of the Support a Child project, as well as the Executive Director of HinduPACT Chapter Development. In addition, Renu has been teaching Hindu Dharma and Hindi to children of all ages from the last 30 years and is a Hindi writer with 8 published books of poetry, stories, and fiction. 2 more are in the press. So take it away, Renu Gupta.
Namaskar. Namaskar, everybody. I would like to share 2 slides with you. The first slide is HinduPACT Goals of 2021, as you can see on the screen. Okay, what we plan to do is the training the Hindu candidates who enter in the politics, it's our students and volunteers through one-to-one basis or through the webinars. We also want to establish 10 chapters in coming years for HinduPACT. We already have established 3 chapters: Ohio, California, and Texas. The Hindu awareness phobia, the awareness about Hindu phobia, and also the need of Hindu identity among our generations to come is very critical for us, and that will be our top priority in coming years. We also plan to publish a lot of books on the issues of Hindus. And as we continue our new projects, we'll continue our Hindu Lounge radio talk show every Sunday, and also the Hindu advocacy through AHAD. Now, I would like to now come to the next slide. Please change the slide about the budget, and that is very important. Okay, we have worked out a budget which is about $300,000, includes 3 full-time staff and 5 interns. The 3 full-time staffs are executive directors and office administrators, and 5 interns will be the high school students who will be working for us. And rest of the money, as you can see, will go for education, admin cost, training, marketing, and publicity. Now I know many of my friends are here for the support of Hindu advocacy. I also know many of my friends give generous donations to Bharat for different seva projects. And we should continue doing it. I know that. Because if Bharat is firm and strong, we are proud and firm here. But how about our Karm Bhumi, America? The question need to be asked is what kind of legacy are we going to leave for our children, second generation, grandchildren, third generation, great grandchildren? Are we, the question has to be asked is, are we making a firm ground for them a secure and a prosperous and healthy future? That is a very important task in front of us. And we need to really form strong Hindu identity and really strong Hindu advocacy in this country to succeed. And I want to all of you to pledge yourself first how you can be part of Hindu Pact, Tan Man Dhan or Mansa Vacha Karmana. In whatever capacity you want to be part, please do that. What way you can do it? You can go to the website hindupact.org, and you can also see here the PO box, our address, if you want to mail a check. Now remember, this is a 501c. We are non-political and we are non-profit organizations, and all your donations will be tax deductible. I want to assure all of you on part of Hindu Pact that every quarter we will publish a report which is talking about our activities, what we have done so far, and also the expenditures, how we are distributing our funds for making our Hindu Pact worthwhile. And that will be received by all the donors, supporters, and volunteers. Now, I want to invite you a very special guest, my very dear Ritvij Hole. Ritvij is a high school student. He is a high school student in Irvine, California. He is a very dynamic Hindu young boy and also a very talented person. He will be our intern for the next year. And I want Ritvij to share with you the need of Hindu advocacy in this country. So, Ritvij, wherever you are in this pool, please come forward and share your views. Thank you so much. Namaskar.
Prithvik, if you can raise your hand, we can make you a presenter.
Is that okay?
Go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Namaste. My name is Ritvij Hole, and for the last 2 years, I've been fighting for the rights of the Hindu community. In those years, if I've noticed one problem that's been hindering our success, it has been a lack of mainstream awareness and support from our political parties. On the left, we have pro-Muslim Hindu-phobic members of government such as Pramila Jayapal, and on the right, we have pro-Christian Hindu-phobic members of government such as Bobby Jindal. So, my friends, with the Mughals on our left and the British on our right, what are we to do? Many Hindus have begun to fight with some success, such as Representative Raja Krishnamurthy on the left and Ritesh Tandon on the right, to be able to change their parties. But while this is so important, we must also make sure that we don't bind ourselves to a political party that takes us for granted, lest one day a presidential candidate says, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're from me or my opponent, then you aren't Hindu. We must have an organization that works with both parties, but that is independent of partisan politics. We must have an organization that doesn't chase after one party, but rather has both parties chasing after them, asking what they can do to win Hindu votes. HinduPACT will be that organization, and if you can support them with your money and time, we shall definitely ensure that our community has a voice in the public square. Dhanyawad.
Thank you so much for that beautiful, those beautiful words. The next item on today's agenda is a moderated panel discussion. However, before I introduce the moderator of that session, we will take a short break and play a brief music performance by Geetika Kulkarni ji. Geetika is a trained Hindustani classical vocalist under renowned playback singer Shri Suraj Wadkar. She is the winner of the Saregama solo singing competition organized by the Hindi Munch in Boston in 2018. She's also a playback singer for numerous Bollywood movies. She has won 2 Radio Mirchi Music Awards for her very famous song, Albela Sajan, in the very famous movie Bajirao Mastani. So here is Gitika Kulkarni.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Preeti ji, for introducing me. I'll be singing live, and this is a very special song and a very inspirational song. So I hope you all enjoy. कुछ पाने की हो आस आस, कोई अरमा हो जो खास खास आशाएं, हर कोशिश में हो वार वार, कर दरियाओं को आर पार आशाएं, तूफानों को चिर के मंजिलों को छीन ले, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं, ओ उड़ जाए लेके खुशी अपने संग तुझको वहाँ, जन्नत से मुलाकात हो, पूरी हो तेरी हर दुआ, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं उम्मीदें, आशाएं, गुजरे ऐसे हर रात रात, हर ख्वाहिशों से बात बात, आशाएं लेकर सूरज से आग आग, गाए जा अपना राग राग, आशाएं कुछ ऐसा करके दिखा, खुद खुश हो जाए खुदा, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, आशाएं खिले दिल की, उम्मीदें हंसे दिल की, अब मुश्किल नहीं कुछ भी, नहीं कुछ भी, ओ हो आशाएं, हो उम्मीदें. Thank you. I would like to request you, all of you, to please donate for this wonderful cause. Thank you.
Namaste, Dhanyavad. We have a very exciting moderated panel discussion for you this evening. I would like to invite the moderator first, Ms. Rakhi Israni ji. Rakhi Israni is the founder and president of Excel Test. She is an attorney by profession and also holds an MBA from Rice University. She's a second generation Hindu American. She was raised in Houston, Texas, and has been very active in community activities for the Hindu society for most of her life. Rakhi was one of the key leaders of the HSC, the Hindu Students' Council, and served as its very first elected president after it was spun off from VHPA. Rakhi lives with her husband and kids in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm going to hand over the rest of the evening to Rakhi. Go for it.
Thank you, PTG. After hearing Ajay and Utsav and everyone talk, this is something that this topic is something that's very dear to my heart. As a second generation, and hearing all the noise that's through social media and others, I'm very excited about this panel. I'd like to welcome all of you to the HinduPACT panel on Hindu advocacy in America. The spheres of influence in life are generally media, politics, education, and most importantly, the home life. We have a very exciting panel of speakers to take us through what we've achieved so far as a community, and more specifically to talk about what lies ahead for us. In the next 45 minutes, we will explore what we need to change as a community, what we need to do to create this change, to create positive change, not only for ourselves, but for all of society. There is no doubt, as has been mentioned by a couple of others in this session so far, that the Hindu community is a community with immense internal fortitude, not only in terms of our education and our financial strength, but also more importantly, in terms of our knowledge, in terms of our culture, in terms of our history. Swami Vivekananda had once said that while America has the jewel box, it's India that has the jewels. It is the essence of our spiritual knowledge and rich culture that has really truly allowed us to survive barbaric invasions and brutal attempts to destroy our society again and again over thousands of years. And yet, today, we are facing nonstop attacks and a flood of negativity against our community, and even worse, it's clearly targeted at our youth. It is these modern challenges that we seem to face on a daily basis that is the focus of our esteemed panel today. Our first speaker is a scholar on Indian history, Dr. Raj Vedam. Dr. Raj Vedam is an electrical engineer by profession. He's been keenly interested in tracing the roots of modern science, mathematics, technology, quest that has led him to study the histories of Babylon, of Greece, Egypt, Rome, China, the Arabs, and many others. His findings directly contradict the Western narrative, which positions the Indian civilization as having received wisdom on math and sciences from outside of India. And using several sources, he shows ancient India as the progenitor of knowledge systems in every inconceivable field of endeavor. To correct this damaging and false mainstream narrative that has been perpetuated about Indian history with instead an evidence-based narrative, he co-founded a think tank based in Houston, Texas called the Indian History Awareness and Research. Since 2015, he has delivered over 100 talks in US and Indian universities and public events. His team worked with many educational agencies in India and the US to review and revise history textbooks for content on Indian history. He has conducted a dozen history workshops for high school teachers in India and in various cities, and spoken at many youth camps and many webinars. His YouTube videos have been seen by millions of viewers. Dr. Vedam.
Thank you, Rakhi ji, for those kind words, and namaste to our viewers. It's a real privilege to take part in this panel on Hindu advocacy organized by VHPA and to speak with my esteemed co-panelists. Now, if you look at history for the past 200 years or so, the Hindus have been on the receiving end of a horrendously distorted narrative from a variety of sources. Whether it is a media with distorted one-sided stories, or movies with obligatory hatred against Hindus and mockery of the Hindu identity, or textbooks that encode distorted history and spurious widespread narratives of oppressor oppressed class dynamics, it is clear to us that disinformation and mischaracterization of Hindu identity, their heritage, their history, and their practices is mainstreamed, and so unfortunately, it has become normalized. Now, if we look at history for the reasons for these, we identify 5 agencies that have controlled the narrative of Indian history, and they subvert the Hindu identity deliberately by imposing their ideologies. At the very outset, first is the colonial narrative. Now, the early colonial historians who wanted to reconcile the enormous history timeline of India with the biblical chronology did so by distorting and discarding the Purana chronology. Further, for the purpose of control of India, using questionable translations of Hindu texts, they introduced divisive narratives which would make the aggrieved depend on the colonizers as saviors. So egregiously distorted ideological translations, these also had the effect of demoralizing the Hindu intelligentsia. This was designed by the British to make Indians look at European sciences and technologies as superior, and Indians, in contrast, as primitive and superstitious. Now, the second framework was a Eurocentric narrative. Ever since the commonality of Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek was observed by William Jones, hosts of Eurocentric scholars have attempted to explain the similarity as because these are descendant languages of Proto-Indo-European language whose homeland was in Central Asia, and which people called Aryans invaded or migrated to India in 1500 BCE. Now, the lack of evidence notwithstanding, this has become the de facto theory applied to Indian history. Every distortion of Indian history stems from this manufactured Aryan invasion or migration theory. The third framework is a missionary narrative. So the notion that Indians are divided into 2 language families, the so-called Aryan and Dravidian, was exploited by missionaries like Caldwell, G.U. Pope, who generated enormous atrocity literature in order to alienate vast sections of economically depressed people from Hinduism and to fuel their anger with such manufactured narratives in order to convert them to Christianity. The fourth framework, the leftist academia. So today, the leftist academia and their echo chambers and media, they use imported sociological lenses. So the academia views all of Indian history with an outsider lens, casting all interactions as class conflicts using oppressor-oppressed narratives. This has resulted in a highly fractured population who are incapable of appreciating the deep cultural unity of India, and readily they adopt divisive manufactured narratives. Media and academia reinforce negative stereotypes, resulting in widespread difference anxiety in Hindus today who reject their identities. Finally, fifth, the Marxist narrative. They have controlled the education sector in India for the past 50 years, and they have purged the Indian academia of insider scholarship pursuant to their ideological leanings of socialist revolution to destroy the old order, in this case Hinduism, to replace the Marxist version of a classless society. The destruction of the emic scholarship has meant an unchallenged free run for any narrative manufactured in academia about Hinduism. So these people have wrested the adhikara for Hinduism very, very successfully. In their narrations, we cannot recognize ourselves or our shared history or our heritage, culture, practices, aspirations, or any of our lived experiences. We can safely conclude that the present day narrations shamelessly espouse hatred for Hindus and seek to destroy their identity using distortions, falsifications, and crass Hindu phobia. Unfortunately, since 1947, the socialist Nehruvian government and its allies and successors have furthered the agenda of these 5 frameworks by institutionalizing unjust, unequal laws that openly discriminate against Hindu identity and expression. Today, in this panel on Hindu advocacy, we should recognize the outsized power of such inimical narratives and the obnoxious role played by these 5 frameworks that I talk in feeding each other's biases, assumptions, methods, and conclusions. We need to devise ways to challenge and eradicate such narrations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vedamji. That was awesome. As Hindus, we have a lot to be proud of, our rich history and beautiful culture. It's a logical guide to life, and yet we're losing our second generation. And as you mentioned, externally, there are forces that are trying to tear us apart and break us down through these false narratives. And yet we, as parents, as a community, fail to take steps and use our access to our spiritual knowledge to strengthen our kids internally. It is on this note that I'm very excited to introduce our second speaker, Pandit Rupnath Sharma. Panditji is a spiritual leader and a practicing Hindu priest at Ram Mandir in Mississauga. He immigrated to Canada from Guyana in 1970. Panditji is currently the founder and spiritual leader of the Ram Mandir. He's president of the Hindu Federation, an umbrella body representing Hindu organizations in Ontario and Canada. He's the president of the Canadian Multi-Faith Federation, an umbrella body representing over 30 faith groups, vice president and Hindu chaplain for interfaith chaplaincy and support of spiritual care services at the Correctional Services in Canada. He's a member of the steering committee of the Interfaith Council of Peel. Prior to retirement, Panditji was very engaged in the corporate business world. During this period, he served in many senior management positions in public and private corporations, including at PricewaterhouseCoopers, Oracle, Ernst & Young, Capgemini. Panditji.
Thank you for that introduction. It has been truly enlightening listening today. I must point out that I'm from Canada and we have 10% of the population of the United States. And but of that 10% population, I think we have a very meaningful population of Hindus. And I want to be thankful to the group for putting this forum together and having this idea of a strong Hindu voice in the public square. My approach to this is taking the basic business systems analysis. Every situation we must understand the current situation. We must understand what our future objectives are and the action plan to get there. What is our current state? And this goes across the board in North America for Hindus. As a community, we are wallowing in the benefits of the highest academic, commercial, and social conditions of this century. But sadly, at the same time, we are suffering from the loss of our dharmic values. Because of our limited dharmic values, we have become very docile, sluggish, and negligent in the representation of ourselves in all facets of social, political, and most evident in the religious world. Also, most alarming, we are slowly but surely losing our greatest advocates for our culture. That is our youths. We are losing them. And we don't know what we're losing them to. They're all healthy, they're all wealthy, they're all very educated, but they don't know who they are as far as cultural dharma. The plan to change this. Major initiatives must be undertaken at all levels of our community to educate our young people in our dharmic values. We must learn from other faith traditions, such as Judaism, the value and power of educating our youths at an early age. And so doing, we must always be cognizant of the fact that we are from a great heritage that is beyond any single religious doctrine, nor not one teacher, but from a vast multitude of philosophies and from a great number of teachers that have stood the test of time and continues to be the foundation for all aspects of human well-being. And that is what we call the Hindu way of life, or Sanatana Dharma. Dr. Ved, thank you for bringing that point of how our culture was degraded and misrepresented by the colonials and all those who represent us. It is said, he who tells the story creates the culture, and they did a great job of creating a false culture. We also need a change in attitude, we Hindus. That is to move from one of being passive to consistent assertiveness. However, in order to achieve this, we need to work on changing the existing perceptions, as Dr. Vedam pointed out. The perceptions are our way of life. Here's how we are perceived. We do not make waves. We are adaptable. We don't make any special requests for praying time. We do not have a hard and fast rules about diet. There's no kosher halal meals or fish on Friday. There's this very unfounded, uneducated perception that we do not have specific time or format to pray, and we believe in many gods. Because of this limited understanding of our dharmic concept, by ourselves and the general public, we are not rooted in any basic foundational values, such as we must read our scriptures daily. Let's talk about how we interact with our scriptures. All of those on this program tonight must have one of our scriptures in their home, either Bhagavad Gita, Ramcharitmanas, or Chalisa. Well, ladies who are listening to me, if you have any money that you want to hide safely for a long time, I want you to put those funds in those religious books. They'll be there until the end of time because no one will open those books to look to see what's inside. I assure you of that. 2, because of this perception that we lack any firm standardized practice, a large majority of Hindus are without any dharmic focus and as such are unable to come together as a single community. If we do not know who we are, it is very difficult for us to stand together. Please note, future parents and young families, that the education process does not begin with children attending classes. It actually commences with the education of the parents. This parental education is beyond the academic and has little to do with financial planning and social status. We are excellent at that kind of stuff. This education is the inculcating of the basic values of Sanatana Dharma as part of everyday life. This is achieved by teaching our children from the ages of 1 to 12 all we can do about our culture and religion. Ladies and gentlemen, after they reach 12, you have to make an appointment to see them, especially in this day and age. Our culture and religious practices are often misunderstood to be rooted in ritualistic practices. We need to highlight the profound teachings on fundamental human values that are enshrined in our ancient scriptures, such as self-discipline and a pathway to healthy lifestyle and our relationship to the Supreme Spirit. When we fully understand and appreciate the true value of our dharma, we can stand tall and firm, and most important, confront the conversion specialists that are targeting our young people. Yes, we are being targeted by many, many denominations. There's a quota to convert so many Hindus a year. In conclusion, I request every parent to pause and ask the following question. What have I given to my child today that will nurture their dharmic needs? We as a community also need to stay connected and encourage respect for each other's traditions, regardless of our origins of being north or south, and agree that there can be unity in diversity. We can be assured of this. A dharmic educated Hindu community with one voice will certainly be heard in the public square and at all levels of government. Thank you for listening. Namaskar.
Thank you, Panditji. Thank you, Panditji. As you rightly said, we are losing our greatest advocates, which are our youth. And parents work hard to force their kids into sports and instruments and biology, math, chemistry classes, but they fail to focus their attention on probably the most important skill necessary for their child's well-being, which is giving them or teaching them the tools necessary to live their life happily. As Panditji mentioned, we tend to focus on the superficial aspects of our culture instead of inculcating within our children the most important thing, which is the guide to life that Hindu Dharma provides. If we just did that, we would set the foundation for our future as a community. Our kids will become the greatest advocates for us. But most importantly, if we did that, we would also be protecting them from the negative noise that surrounds them as they grow up in this society. Whether it's from social media, or whether it's from school's education system, from the peers, we're, as a second generation, we're constantly surrounded by it. And it's on this note that I'm very excited to introduce our third speaker, Ms. Vindhya Adapa, who is a second generation Hindu American, who has firsthand experienced the challenges of growing up in this society replete with subtle Hinduphobia and Hindu hate. Before I introduce Vindhya-ji, I just want to let you know that we'll have all four speakers and then we'll do a question and answer. I know some people have sent me questions and we'll have those at the right after the fourth speaker. Vindhya-ji is currently an attorney advisor at the US Department of Treasury, the Office of the General Counsel, International Affairs Division. At Treasury, Vindhya primarily focuses on transactions appearing before the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States, as well as issues concerning multilateral development banks, global finance and development, and other foreign policy matters. She previously worked at a global law firm as a corporate lawyer, and then most recently as Assistant General Counsel for HIAS, an international nonprofit refugee resettlement agency. She's been actively involved with the Hindu community in the greater Washington area, as well as with the Indian diaspora nationally and internationally, having most recently served as an invited youth panelist for the 2019 Pravasi Bharatiya Divas conference in New Delhi. Vindhya ji is also a professional musician and singer and launched her debut single in the Bollywood music industry in 2019. Vindhya.
Namaste, everyone. Is everyone able to hear me? Okay, great. Before I start, I just want to give a huge vote of thanks and gratitude to Rakhi ji, Jay Bansal ji, Jay ji, everyone, Utsav ji, everyone who's part of HinduPACT for organizing this event and for having me here. And before I start, I just want to say I hope everyone has also stayed happy, healthy, and safe during these crazy times. I wanted to start my talk today by first telling you about a small story about a gentleman I met a few years ago who had a deep impact on my life and who gave me newfound perspective on what it means to be a civically engaged Hindu American. So I'm going to change the name here for privacy's sake, and I'm going to call him Sanjay. Sanjay is a Pakistani Hindu. I met Sanjay a couple of years ago at an event, and he's a Pakistani Hindu activist. We were introduced by a mutual friend, and when I sat down with him to talk, I really was not prepared for what I was about to hear in our following 2-hour conversation. For the next 2 hours, Sanjay sat with me and bit by bit, detail by detail, talked about every act of discrimination, all of the atrocities and all of the horrors that he and his family faced in Pakistan solely because of being minorities and solely because of the fact that Sanjay is a Pakistani Hindu activist and a vocal activist who actually speaks on behalf of minorities in Pakistan. A couple of years after meeting Sanjay, I had the privilege of meeting another Bangladeshi Hindu activist who more or less told me similar things about her life in Bangladesh. Now, at the time of meeting these two individuals, I was actually Assistant General Counsel at HIAS, which is the world's oldest refugee resettlement agency, and it's a Jewish agency. Because of my connections and because of folks I knew on our direct legal team, I was able to help Sanjay and this woman get access to our attorneys and at least start exploring options for asylum in the United States. But I was so shook internally and a bit disturbed. I thought to myself, how is it that me, being an attorney, working in this space, that I don't know enough about this issue? Sure, I knew about the migration and refugee crisis generally. I knew a lot about what was happening in South and Central America. I knew a lot about the Rohingya issue. But I truly did not know enough, I felt, about what Hindu refugees and dharmic minorities were facing in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. I sat down with myself, and that's when I realized that in order to be a great advocate, you need to have genuine conviction in your heart. And I think there are 3 ingredients for having conviction, in my personal viewpoint. I think conviction stems from 3 different accesses of connection. The first is an emotional connection, having an emotional connection to an inner belief inside of you about that issue. The second is having the connection of relevance and feeling like this issue matters to you, that it's practical and matters to you. And third, the third form of connection, I think, is having knowledge of the past and of your history, because it's by looking through the lens of the past that we're able to apply those lessons to the present and learn how we're going to address the present now, address these issues now. When I think back to my time at HIAS and how much I learned about the Jewish faith, I also think about how I saw these qualities epitomized by my own colleagues there. They had a strong and deep emotional connection to their Jewish faith, to the teachings of the Torah. They felt that the issue of refugee rights and asylee rights was relevant to them and was a practical issue for them. And they had a deep and rich knowledge of their history as Jewish people, whether it was from learning about the Holocaust or about the history, the persecution of Jewish people prior to the Holocaust, or whether it was about learning about anti-Semitism in the United States as it's continued to evolve. When I reflect on my own personal journey and I think about being born and raised here and how I came to Sanatana Dharma, I feel that we as a community have done a fairly good job of building that emotional connection in our youth. I know a lot of my friends grew up attending Bal Vihar, had gone to Chinmaya Mission. Indeed, at a lot of universities, there's a focus on developing bhakti, on teaching students about the mythological and esoteric aspects of Hinduism. But where I personally have found the gap to be is on the last two ingredients that I mentioned. Developing this idea of relevancy, which I think stems from having an honest dialogue about what the Hindu perspective should be or can be on issues like abortion, gay marriage, climate change, what have you. And second of all, on truly educating our youth about Hindu history, Hindu persecution, and Indian history. 2020 was a very interesting year. We all saw the Black Lives Matter movement gain enormous global traction and momentum, all for, I think, a very legitimate and worthy reason. And at the same time, the BLM movement also sparked interesting debate and discussion around casteism, colorism, and racism in South Asia. What saddened me the most, though, was to see Hindu-phobic elements and Hindu-phobic rhetoric subsume that conversation and take away from what could otherwise have been a really genuine and fruitful dialogue. And we were sort of hindered in our ability to educate folks about how colonialism, for instance, has deeply entrenched colorism and casteism and sort of manipulated our teachings into something else from what they were intended to be. So I hope to talk more about these issues in detail today, but I think if we can focus on these three things I mentioned, we can really have a great and productive generation of future advocates who will not only advocate on behalf of the Hindu community, but on behalf of all communities. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you, Vindhya. So, you know, one of the things that Vindhya had mentioned to me when I spoke to her on the phone, and you know, I think she's completely correct, that even if parents that do everything correct, they do everything right, growing up as a second generation Hindu in this country with all of the stuff that's going on and all the noise that's around us is really difficult to stay a true Hindu, I believe. And as Dr. Vedam ji mentioned, the narrative has been crafted externally with the express intention of breaking us down and, breaking the psyche of our youth down. Actually, it's very hard to, when the parents haven't really built up that strong foundation within the kids, it's very difficult to withstand the pressures that you see on a daily basis or, in the social media. We need to help our kids to develop a strong internal framework while also focusing on the external circumstances. I mean, they both have to happen, and they both have to happen in order to create a positive, lasting change for our community. While Vindhya ji shows us the effect of staying passive internally within our families and our communities, our fourth speaker, Mr. Rick Mehta, will show us the external negative effects of remaining passive or not acting. Dr. Rick Mehta made history as the first generation American and first American of Indian origin to win the nomination of a major political party for the United States Senate race in New Jersey. He's also the first person of color to win the GOP nomination for a statewide race in New Jersey history. Rick G is a biotech entrepreneur, innovator, healthcare policy expert, and a licensed pharmacist and attorney. He was the Republican nominee for US Senate in 2010. He's setting the record for the most votes ever received by a Republican statewide candidate in New Jersey. He got almost 40% of the vote on a Republican ticket, which is super impressive. Professionally, Rick worked at the United States Food and Drug Administration under the Bush administration. He received his BS in pharmacy from Rutgers, his PharmD from the University of Arkansas for medical sciences, his JD from Rutgers University School of Law, and a Master's of Law in global health law, international institutions through a joint program with Georgetown University Law Center and the Graduate Institute for International and Development Studies in Geneva, Switzerland. Rick lives in Morris County with his wife, Rima, his 3 little boys, and their dog, Dexter. Rick.
Okay. Thank you so much. First, let me just start out by saying thank you for the invitation to be here. It's such an honor. And Rocky, thank you for those kind introductory remarks. Jay, for the invite. And of course, the HinduPACT, which I think is doing an amazing job at really collating some of our values into one organization, of which I think will serve politicians and future politicians really well. So it's an honor to be here. For those of you I've not met, I'm Rick Mehta, and my wife Rima and I, we're both first-generation Americans. We live in New Jersey, and as Rocky mentioned, we got our 3 little boys and our dog Dexter. Our story is like a lot of Hindus in America: humble beginnings, hard work, and the belief that the American dream is available to anyone willing to chase it. 50 years ago, my father immigrated here legally with only $100 in his pocket. My mother also, she worked 2 jobs and she managed the household. Their hard work and sacrifice and their strong conviction in religion paved the way for me and my sister to achieve things they could not have imagined. In fact, my sister is an allergy immunologist, and I'd say maybe the smarter one in our family. I graduated, as Rocky mentioned, from Rutgers College of Pharmacy and worked at the hospital. I worked overnight to put myself through law school. Now I'm a law professor at Georgetown University, where I teach health law. While I'm not a politician, for more than a year, I've had the honor of campaigning for one of New Jersey's highest offices and being the US Senate nominee for the Republican Party. And more importantly, I got to be the voice for so many great people across New Jersey, and honored to have received almost 1.9 million votes. I heard our people's stories. I felt our community's pain. I've seen our struggle. Our collective strength and resolve will drive us to fight back against all odds and to never give up, no matter how difficult the challenges we face. For me, I will always continue to stand with the amazing folks I've met during my campaign, and I will always champion small businesses and religious freedoms, which are not only the backbone of our nation's economy, but the pathway to achieve the American dream that so many of us have achieved here. I heard Preeti earlier in this program mentioned about the GDP and household income of Hindu Americans, and it's quite impressive. For me, Hindu values continue to serve aspiring politicians like myself, even in our political pursuits in America. For example, we must not let personal ambitions overshadow the greater good. Politicians hold an important and influential role in our lives, and we must aspire to hold those values that we believe in true. So when we fight, we do it with good policy, not provocation. And we fight to make sure our values are respected and advanced. And so while the pandemic has us concerned, mental health and unemployment issues continue to rise, I remain optimistic for a brighter future and the ability to face the real challenges that lay ahead in the coming months. Hindu Dharma can guide our values as American politicians, and the freedom of religion and the right to fellowship and worship should never be infringed. When I launched my campaign, my policy platform was based on one tenet: nonviolence. Make no mistake, I support our Bill of Rights and our Second Amendment, but I also see no place for violence in our society. Listen, I'm proud to have been the first Republican of color ever nominated for the US Senate in New Jersey. New Jersey is only second to California with the second number of most Indians in America. It's my hope that my race, my accomplishment, will inspire our next generation to enter public life and be part of the political process. Aspire to protect our religious freedoms that America holds true. And I'm going to continue to reach beyond my party's traditional base to non-traditional, conservative communities, minorities, young people, people who love America and who want a stronger, safer, and a more united America under God with freedom of religion. So thank you so much for having me. I look forward to answering questions on this panel and continuing to inspire those to join the political process and hold true our Hindu values. Thank you, Rocky.
Thank you, Richie. So actually, before we jump into the question and answer portion, I just wanted to recognize our media partners. Ajay?
Ajay, you're on mute.
So I want to recognize the three media partners that we have: Bharat FM. Bharat FM. I'm sorry. Okay. Well. Oh, sorry. I'm on mute. I was on mute. So I want to recognize the three media partners that we have today: Bharat FM, Dia TV, and Tag TV. And I want to thank all of them for simulcasting this particular show on their broadcast network, set-top TV boxes, and on their YouTube or Facebook channels. So thank you, Bharat FM. Thank you, Tag TV. And thank you, Dia TV. Back to you, Rakhi.
Okay, all right, thank you, and thank you, Chief. So, so we're gonna, there have been some questions from the chat, and I will get to that. I do have a question to kind of start us off, and I'm gonna direct this first to Dr. Vedamji. Hindu Dharma is rich and it's beautiful and its approach to life, but many believe that, including Western historians like, for example, Will Durant, that certain concepts within our culture, moksha, karma, or even the idea that all religions are the same and they all lead to the same path, have really resulted in a certain passiveness and reluctance to fight for what's right or just for our community, or in general. What are your thoughts on this? Does our culture teach us to be passive?
No, I think let me start by saying that I don't think it's a correct assertion to say all religions are the same. There are clearly different truth claims that are made by several of the Abrahamic claims. We know that. And people who have studied a little on Hinduism also know the nature of claims that are made in Hinduism. Every one of them is verifiable to a great extent. So I don't think anything in Hinduism says you have to be passive in the face of what we call adharma. Each of us is enjoined upon to understand our goal in life. What is our goal in life? A Hindu in one-line sentence is a seeker who wants to dispel the avidya about our true existence. That is our goal in life. In this lifetime and maybe across lifetimes, depending on our karma phala, we are after knowledge, we are after truth. What is the truth of my existence? In doing so, I'm enjoined upon to follow my dharma. What is my dharma? I need to understand that I wear many hats. I have many dharmas to, as a parent, as a speaker, as an engineer, whatever. I need to do the right thing in all of them. In the process of doing dharma, I need to reject adharma. So rejecting adharma is also a big part of who we are as Hindus. So in the process of rejecting adharma, wherever we see there's a problem, either in the narrative of our history, there's some untruths over there, we have to stand up and say what we believe from our experience, from our knowledge, from our journeys, our understanding, our shared experiences, our history, heritage, culture. We need to get out there and say that your narratives seem to be completely off the mark over here, because none of us can identify with what you're saying. Neither me, nor my parents, nor my grandparents, or anybody that we know about identifies with the kind of narrative you're trying to thrust upon us. So no, Rakiji, I'd say that it does not, there's nothing in Hinduism that says we had to be passive. Nothing in Hinduism that says that we're all the same. Hinduism says evaluate the truth. Try to find out what the truth is. At any given time, we understand the pramanas. What are the pramanas? Pramanas are means to knowledge. What are the means to knowledge? Whenever somebody makes a truth claim, that like such things, if you do such a thing, you'll accomplish something called salvation or whatever. We have to evaluate such truth claims using our pramanas to see if that is valid or not. That is the meaning of our journey. So don't keep quiet. Wherever you see something that is at odds with your understanding of your culture, religion, history, or way of life, stand up and correct it.
Thank you. Panditji, did you want to add to something to the same question about, what your view on whether certain concepts lead to a passiveness or results in us being a little bit passive?
I must confess that I do not believe a human attitude or lifestyle is built upon any religious tradition. It's a human tendency. We choose to be passive or not passive because it's convenient or it's not inconvenient. But our dharma, agreeing with Dr. Vedam, declares clearly, stand up and fight. Not literally, pugilistically, but firmly represent your cause, defend the truth, defend the dharma. It is our duty to do this. And it doesn't matter who we are, what state of society we all have that responsibility because we are all either parent, child, mother, father, brother, sister, friend, and relative. In each of those capacities, we have a right and a responsibility and our duty to defend whatever unrighteousness is there. So I'm saying that we accept or we adapt or we allow ourselves, just like the colonials labeled us, we can accept this label of we are passive. Oh yes, we don't. And the current situation in the world is whereby, if you look at the diaspora here in Canada or in the United States, where we have maybe people from who are of the same religion from all over the world, gather in one society, and we are all promoting our traditions. We as Hindus, in the school, we do not ask for any special things. In the place of public, we do not demand anything. One of the politicians in Canada, I will not mention his name, had a meeting with the Hindu community and made a statement. He said, you folks are very low overhead. There was a moment of pause. What do you mean? Well, what he was doing is complimenting us. We don't complain about anything. He doesn't have to wake up and listen to 100 emails or people protesting against the government and saying they're Hindus. No, we don't do that. But we must stand up for our rights. The reason we are not standing up is because I pointed out our young people, or those who are in the position to do that, are not confident enough to call themselves, I'm proud of a Hindu, but okay, the conversionist person comes up and tells them, so you have so many gods, blah, 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 blah. And they can't even argue with it. And the easiest thing is, okay, I'm going to give in. You got it. You win the day. I'm moving on. You're right. We don't have enough background information to argue our case. And that's it. And that's why we proceed as being passive.
So thank you. Thank you both, Dr. Vedamji and Vanditji. Vindhya, Rick, if you guys want to jump in at any point, I have certain questions I'm going to direct to certain panelists, but anybody can jump in at any time. So the second question I have actually, I know both, Vindhya, you had said you worked for a Jewish refugee. I mean, they were mostly Jewish, and Panditji has been a part of the interfaith. So I'm going to start with Vindhya, I know you said that as parents have done a good job, or they have been kind of educating, but our history shows that we were ruled for more than 1,000 years by foreigners in some of the most barbaric and horrific ways. But yet our second generation hardly knows those details. On the other hand, the Jewish community suffered immensely at the hands of the Nazis during World War II, and the emotions and the details from a lot of my Jewish friends are intimately shared with their kids. What are your thoughts, having interacted with the Jewish community? What are your thoughts on what they are doing right, and maybe what we're doing wrong, or where the disconnect is, basically? So Vindhya, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So before I start, I want to say that I certainly don't mean to make any sort of conclusive statements or anything on how we've been, parenting. And I know that it is in large part, I am hugely where I am today because I had very informed and engaged parents who did teach me a lot about history. And I grew up watching, the entirety of the Mahabharata, the B.R. Chopra series. And I had a lot of fun conversations with my father. But I think there's a few places where I see some key differences. The first part, honestly, is just we have to look at social and historical context, right? Jewish people, and I'm speaking purely from just my experience and sort of what I've seen in my interactions with folks at HIAS, but the Jewish history in the United States goes back quite farther than our sort of wave of migration to the United States. And because they I think there is a huge focus. I think there's a huge focus on sort of centralized community support, a centralized place of worship, which of course we see kind of pervasive in Abrahamic faiths. And when you have that kind of model, I think it becomes easier to have focused debate, focused discussion, and focused transmission of history. In our community, in sort of not just the Indian Hindu community, but just the Hindu diaspora globally, right? We're very diverse. We all come from different subparts and subregions of India. And in a sense, while that plurality is beautiful, I think it makes it harder for us to figure out, which parts of our narrative are universal and which parts we're really going to focus in on and transmit. This actually ties into a question that came in the chat box, if I can take a moment to answer that, Rocky G, because I think it's salient and important to this. So there was a question that came in the chat box, about what are the 3 steps you'd recommend to make an issue relevant? And I think this ties into your question about the Jewish community as well. First of all, I love that this person said 3 steps, because I'm an attorney and I think in 3s and 4s and 2s. So I love that. So I think the first thing, right, is we need to develop connections between issues. So I'm going to just kind of focus on refugees, for instance, right now. If we're going to talk about, the plight of a refugee, we need to understand that these difficulties they face, the obstacles they face, are pretty universal. So whether you are a refugee from Syria, whether you're a refugee from Venezuela, whether you're a Hindu refugee from Pakistan, there's going to be universal hardships, universal things that a human being goes through when he or she has lost his or her home. And the first thing is being able to understand, when we have these debates in American society, that there's connections between there's connections between different groups of people in the world who are facing similar things in this bucket. The next thing is, I think we need to develop alliances, and Pandit Ji talked about this so well, as well as Raj Vedam Ji. We need to be able to find organizations that do this work across faiths, across even ideological beliefs, if be, and develop that relationship where we can start tying in, narratives together. So if we're going to talk about refugee rights, let's talk about Syrian refugees, let's talk about Coptic Christians from Egypt, but let's also talk about dharmic communities in South Asia, right? For instance, Coptic Christian populations in Egypt and dharmic communities in Afghanistan are both facing persecution on the basis of religion. So I think that issue connection and alliances is really key. And then what I've seen the Jewish community do so well is they've been able to elevate these issues to the front and center. One reason why we're lacking in knowledge, why our youth, I think, doesn't have a clear idea of history at times, is because these issues haven't been elevated to mainstream discourse. Where on the news, where on social media, right, are you seeing a George Clooney or like other celebrity endorsing the rights of Hindu refugees? Where are you seeing it covered on CNN or any other sort of even mainstream print outlet? It's so rare. And I think if we can focus on having front-facing debate by aligning ourselves with groups across religions, across ethnicities that are doing this work, it helps to shed some light and publicity and fame in that issue. And once you actually do that, I think something becomes more relevant to someone, and it helps us keep hold of that narrative and then be able to transmit it across generations. Without that front-facing dialogue, without those connections and relationships, I think we'd have different competing narratives, and it becomes hard to synthesize that together into a transmittable story. If you look at the Jewish community, there's very much a Jewish story, right? The story of Passover. I've seen, when I was at Highest, there was these staff gatherings where we would frequently recite these amazing stories of overcoming adversity, and they would stem from, the Torah and the Old Testament. There's, I think by virtue of being a pluralistic faith that's not centralized around one book or one scripture or one house of worship, that it's a little more challenging for us to do that. But one way I see we can make up for it is by taking a hot button civic or political issue and making sure our narrative latches onto that issue as well.
Bandaji, did you want to say anything on this particular topic? You're sorry, you're mute. Let me.
I'm so happy that we are using relationships and comparisons to Judaism. I mean, the history goes back, and I think their history has been made very public because of World War II. But it's interesting to note that if you go back as far back as the Spanish Inquisition of the time of Christopher Columbus, and even before that, the Jewish people persecuted at that time in Europe. And that history is shown in films and in books. If you do European history, you'll read about that. But nowhere on any history books have I seen the history of India where the Mughal invasion ruled India for 1,000 years in any Western context of things. So we are missing the narrative being presented. As Dr. Vedam said, if it is being presented, it is being streamlined to meet certain needs of a certain community or to project something, but it's never to project the reality of what the history and the atrocities that happened in India, that we can tell the story to our children and they can say, oh my God, and how tragic it was. But we have no narrative to really present to them today and say, here's that incident that happened at that date and that time. But I could go back in European history and give you specific times of the persecution of the Jews by different communities and so on and so on. We need that kind of narrative prepared. And I hope that the people like Dr. Vedam and others will get the effort out and make this information available to the public, and then get our Bollywood people to make movies relevant to that and declare it to be historic facts. Declare it to be historic facts, not myth. It is a historic fact that these things happen. If we don't do this, then our children will never learn this story. It's not taught in the schools. They're not going to give a special class on Hinduism history. We need to do it ourselves.
A quick point, Rakiji. So Panditji, thank you. That is very relevant. But the battle is uphill all the way. I began my talk with 5 frameworks. Those 5 frameworks started with the British, and today it is continued by the Marxists and the Indian government in all its tamasic glory. They continue to uphold these frameworks, these 5 frameworks, and continues. So if 5 people are holding a narrative dearly to their chest, believe me, to wrest it out of them is exceedingly difficult. Each time emic author, scholar comes and talks about these things, you can guess what is going to happen. There'll be labels of saffron, there'll be labels of Hindutva, Nazi, and all these kind of ideologies slapped around and bandied about carelessly. This is what we see. They do not want to give any space to the emic voice. Merely by pigeonholing you as a Hindutva or as a Nazi or as a fascist or as saffron, they don't have to hear what you're saying. They've immediately tuned you out. The minute you espouse these values, they've tuned you out. You're no longer relevant. Whatever facts you bring to the table is irrelevant because they're upholding Columbia University, University of Chicago, Harvard University, and I don't have to name the professors in these places, and Rutgers University. They're holding up these narratives because they have the adhikara. So it is uphill. That doesn't mean we stop. We continue talking about it in forums like this and trying to awaken people about it. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question, I think our time is actually we're kind of reaching the end. I have 2 other questions I want to make sure I ask to all of you. The first is, in your opinion, how can Hindus in America play a role in Hindu advocacy? What do you feel we can do better as a community to make our voices heard in mainstream advocacy especially around issues dealing with racism and discrimination, refugee and asylum and things like that? So I'll open it up. Whoever wants to. How can Hindus in America play a role in Hindu advocacy?
Well, I'll go ahead and start on this one, Rocky.
Sure.
And what I'll contribute to this and contribute to the conversation briefly in the closing minutes is that Hindu Dharma, as I mentioned before, politics can be very influential in American politics. And we have to hold true those values and hold our politicians accountable. We got to get our youth inspired to vote. And we can't just say, okay, well, I'm an American of Indian origin. Do you still espouse those values that have been brought to the table in terms of what's defined you to become the reason why you've decided to run for office? And we can start with that. We can get more youth inspired into our political process. Hindu Dharma can guide our values as American politicians. And I agree with my fellow panelists here. We can learn a lot from the Judeo-Christian values that have been brought in or the persecution thereof that's happened. Look at the Jewish community, and they stand together. They vote as a bloc. They vote for politicians that continue to espouse and inspire their collective values. We're no different. Let's make sure we hold true to that and make sure we hold our politicians accountable to that. And frankly, I haven't seen that in the Samosa caucus, but I want to make sure that our politicians moving forward do espouse those values and continue to inspire our youth.
Great. Thank you so much, Rick. Pandaji?
I think it's important that we go back again to our friends, the Jewish community. There's a ton of money that is poured in to keeping the Jewish organization and advocacy happening. In every part of the world where they are, there's community money funding this. Today, what we are doing, we are appealing for funds. This organization is a great beginning, but it cannot exist if it's just a bunch of volunteers. It needs to have paid and professional infrastructure to stand there every day, every minute, to filter and to respond constantly, to advocate and to demand and to promote and to continue to educate. But it has to be an infrastructure built. We do not put our money into these things. We need to get our Hindu communities, the business people, to make sure they commit dollars to this because it's important for us. We are quite happy to say, look, I'm making money, I'll give a little donation to the mandir and so on, but we need to give dollars to protect Hinduism and to promote Hinduism, and will give us a lobby positions in the right place at the right time in the different bureaucracies of levels of government. If you're not there at the right time and the right place for the right people, we don't get recognized. We need the financial support of our community. And we can't just take it casually and access small dollars. We have to get, the budget that you showed here is a child's play. That is nothing to support an organization of what you're talking about. I'm sure the young lady, Vidya, if you investigate where you're working with the Jewish community, their budget is massive. And it doesn't come from the government. It comes from their community. We need to do the same thing. And I cannot say this, I cannot overemphasize this. We Hindus need to take out of our pocket and support these causes.
Yeah, I would just add on to say that from what I've seen personally, I think there's so many wonderful organizations, working to fix this and doing tireless work every day, usually with volunteers to address this. But there's really a lack of proper educational materials and a lack of information out there about our history, right? We have a rich and ancient history. And when I say history, I know it's a loaded term. We can talk about, today I sort of picked one issue to focus on, which was like dharmic minorities in South Asia. But there's so many aspects about our culture, our history. I know in the wake of BLM, I got a lot of young Hindu Americans asking me about my thoughts on the caste system. There's so much about that. There's so much out there that we don't learn in high school. We don't learn in college. There's so much information to be still kind of filled up and explained about how British colonialism had really destroyed our sense of confidence. And I'm sure Dr. Vedamji is an invaluable resource that can be one of those key figures to bridge those gaps. But I think this is so important because what I've noticed is, we're now working with a generation and with an era of social media and technology. And sadly, there's this enormous soft power that social media has to just transmit information like that. People use their platforms and people don't always use them wisely, right? Just to share like a very personal anecdote, in the wake of sort of all this talk around casteism and colorism, one of my best friends, who is Tamil American, born and raised here, her family comes from the Dalit community in India. And they are proud Hindus. They are very proud Hindus. We had a very honest discussion about the very real discrimination that her village and her family has faced in India. So no one is denying that we have some issues we do need to address in our culture and society. We do need to have, I think, these transparent, open dialogues with our kids who are asking us these questions at the dinner table. But at the same time, we need to be willing to invest into education and into that front-facing, again, PR and education that brings our perspective to the table. My friend personally felt like a lot of this rhetoric was disenfranchising Dalit Hindus, proud Dalit Hindus who find their identity and faith in Hinduism, right? It's a whole nother narrative that is not out there. So I think, I think we need to invest in education. I think there's some wonderful groups out there that, HAF, Kona, we're all aware of them, that put out materials and slide decks and like kits around Diwali and like amazing resources out there. So I'm confident we will get there slowly, but as all of you know, we're just facing a barrage of misinformation. It's almost like an hourly basis, and it's pretty nefarious. It's in the form of tweets, it's in the form of images and WhatsApp messages. This isn't like the old days where someone published an article and then you had 3 weeks to respond with your own article. So I would say, for me personally speaking, I think education and a way to transmit knowledge of our history, but in an easy to understand way, in a technologically friendly way, is I think a great way to go.
You're on mute, Rakiji.
Yeah, sorry, Dr. Vilanji, did you have anything to add to
this? Yes, excellent comments made by my co-panelists, so nothing much I can add to what they said. However, I'd like to quickly say there are roles for the individual, roles for the institution, and roles for the government. At the individual level, each of us needs to feel empowered. Today is an age of social media, right? There is YouTube videos, there are Google gives you up so many books. So parents who ask the questions, what do I tell my children, need to go out there and watch the videos of thought leaders, of Swamijis who put their discourses, try to understand what it means to be a Hindu, explain to your children about the history, about the practices and so on. So the individual level, people can learn. People can donate, people can support organizations which are doing a good job, like, for example, HinduPACT. Go and support these organizations. Enroll your children in Vedanta School, Chinmaya Missions, and so many other things. Each one be an advocate and an ambassador for Hinduism. Wherever you see that there is a problem in the narrative, stand up and correct it. So you can be an advocate just with your practices, the way you live your life and so on. At the institutional level, people, big groups like Ramakrishna Mission, Chinmaya Mission, and so on and so forth, many of them are there, including newspapers, magazines, all aligned towards Hinduism. Let them take up these causes, organize conferences, support scholars, make sure that a certain narrative gets heard over there, and make sure these things happen. At the government level, now I'm talking about India and maybe tangentially in the United States also. At the Indian level, try to lobby for removing the discriminatory laws. There are so many discriminatory laws against Hindus. So we need to make sure that these discriminatory laws go. And how do we make that happen? Through action committees. If we are able to make these groups in US as well as in India, for that we need money. So let people support the money, institutions, individuals support the money, put the legal teams, and go after the people who make these narratives either institutionalized through networks or other places, or the people who write such bills highlight these people as Hindu-phobic and unfit for public office, and try to make sure that policies get heard. All this needs activism, money. I'm very, very glad that HinduPACT is out there starting on this journey.
So the last question actually is for Rick. Rick, because I mean, it's like we talked about, that it's super impressive that you were the GOP nomination for Senate in New Jersey. What is your experience as a Hindu American running for office? And what is the type of support that you got from the community? What are your post-election views as a candidate?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'll tell you, Rocky, thanks. My political career just started. And this is just the beginning, not the end. And I'll tell you, the community involvement and the community spirit was tremendous for me to achieve as many votes as I did. But I think we can do better. One thing I'll say, as a Republican, we've continued to break glass ceilings. They continue to paint the Republican Party as one of a party of old white men. And the truth is, it's an actually very inclusive party that has allowed me to come in without compromising any of my values, any of my belief system, allowed me to bring my children and continue to bring them to temple and advocate and advance our freedoms of religion, which is our First Amendment. And I think that's critical because we need to live and continue to live in a society that respects our constitutional rights and respects our First Amendment and our Bill of Rights. And as a law professor, I mean, that's something that's not only critical and important to me, but it's the foundation of our country and our values. And so while we continue to be this melting pot of immigrants and different religions, America is not an a-religious society. And while they say it's secular, it's built off of the beliefs of multiple different religions. I think we can continue to learn. I think we need to stay authentic. And I think any politician that runs for office needs to continue to stay authentic and true to who they are, how they were raised, and can truly advance the American dream in this country. And so I'll say that if we continue to come together, that's why I'm so excited about HinduPACT. We are going to be very successful and start with influence from a political position. And I look forward to continuing to drive that dialogue.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of you. It was a wonderful discussion. I mean, it's pretty clear that we have a lot of work to do as a community to support not only our kids, but to get involved in the media and the articles and their narratives and politics, right? And so it's for that reason I thank you, Rick, that that you stood up and you got involved. In conclusion, I just want to say that in the Bhagavad Gita, upon seeing his loved ones and family on the other side of the battlefield, Arjun tells Lord Krishna that he doesn't want to fight. And as we all know, in the 18 chapters of the Gita, Lord Krishna explains to Arjun that it is his duty to fight for dharma and for righteousness. It is all of our duty to stand up for what is right and just at all times. When my brothers and sisters were younger, my father used to tell us this one saying, "Khud hi kokar itna buland कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से पूछे बता तेरी रज़ा क्या है," which means that make yourself so strong that before destiny is decided, God asks you, what do you want? You tell me, what do you want? And the Hindu community has the financial strength to move mountains. We have the intelligence to do anything, but we have failed as a community to build up the political strength or be involved in the spheres of influence that actually create positive change, not only for ourselves, but for the entire world. We need to start focusing on building that strength. And it has been actually said, it's been said by many people that financial strength without political strength is suicide. Ask the Jewish community, they learned this lesson the hard way, and they changed. And now they are one of the most politically connected communities in the United States. As Swami Vivekananda had said, arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. I hope that everyone watching will understand that it is time that we stand up, that we, as Utsub said, that we demand a seat at the table, not only for ourselves, but for the second generation and for the betterment of the entire community. With that, thank you very much. Thank you to all the panelists for all that you did and for all that you have shared with us. And I hope everyone enjoyed that. Thank you. Namaste.
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 Thank you. Thank you, Rakiji. That was an amazing panel. All the speakers were incredible and so much food for thought moving forward. We do have our work cut out for us and our hands full, so to speak. My second last speaker that I would like to call for this evening is Vishaka Menakji. Vishaka Menak is an entrepreneur in the healthcare arena and a clinical registered nurse. She's a longtime volunteer for Ekal Vidyalaya, currently serving as the Midwest Regional President. She has organized and led many charitable concerts, Seva for the homeless, and delivered fresh meals to the homeless, especially during the pandemic. Her passion for Hindu samskaras and the way of life has led her to get involved in advocacy and promotion of Hindu Dharma, and therefore to play an active role in the HinduPACT. So I present to you Vishaka Menakji.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Preeti ji. I totally appreciate that. And what a wonderful, invigorating panel discussion that was. I am totally amazed and very relatable. Everything was so relatable. I completely forgot what I was going to say now. But, namaskar to everyone who's watching and who is listening to us. This is our very first own HinduPACT 2020 gala for this year. And as you heard, we are an advocacy group to bring Hindus to the forefront of American politics. Since everything is covered, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here. I was actually born in Africa, and I grew up in England, and then I got married, and my husband's from America. So I have been living in America for 28 years. My grandfather migrated to Africa from Bharat, and likewise, my husband's great-grandfather migrated to Africa from Bharat, and I feel we are products of the British colonialism, like some of the panelists were discussing. Growing up in England, there was no education on our history. All we learned about was British history. And coming here and getting more involved, I started reading up on our history, and I got a little bit of knowledge. But sustaining my grandparents, my parents, and my husband's family also, the sustaining factor was that we were Hindus. The Hindu values and the Hindu way of life really sustained them throughout those dark ages. And, they prospered after. The reason they went there were the British railways. They were building railways, and they shipped boatloads of Indian people to Africa to build these railways. So that's how we ended up in Africa. And there are many Indians in Africa. As you know, there was an exodus in Uganda in 1972. That's the reason a lot of the Indians ended up in the Western world. So, there is a lot of history. We have spanned 3 continents, but we have prevailed because of our Hindu values and our Hindu way of life. So that is amazing. And it is very sad to see this happening. We have not had any issues of ourselves identifying as Hindus. In all these years of struggle and the bringing up and the challenges and the changes that the families went through, we never ever questioned our identity. But here I feel, there is a struggle with the Hindu identity. And I find that the youth today are finding it very challenging. They are conflicted between 2 cultures, and Hindu identity has become a bit of an issue. So it is time that we need to educate our youth, our children, and advocate for our youth in order to bring Hindu ethos and dharmic values of unity and diversity to the forefront. So in order to kickstart this effort, as Panditji mentioned in his one of his speeches, we need funds. Funds are needed. And that is one of the objectives of today's gala, is to raise some funds for our vision and our mission. So I urge you all, please donate to this cause. And it is a vital and essential cause in order to sustain and benefit the future of our Hindu Americans here. You can donate electronically via the link HinduPACT.org, and there is a donate button there, or you can even send a check to the corporate offices. The address is on the website, HinduPACT.org. Your donations are tax deductible. We are a nonprofit organization, and you can be rest assured that every penny of your donations will be accounted for. So please, please donate it to this wonderful and essential cause. Again, I'm saying that no amount is too small or too large. And I thank you in advance for your donations. Namaskar.
Namaskar, Dhanyavad. Thank you so much for that, Vishaka ji. And now our final speaker, I have introduced him to all of you earlier, but he's going to come on, Utsav Chakrabarti ji, and I think he wanted to share what he had prepared earlier. And I'm sure it's going to be very, very exciting. So Utsav ji, the floor is yours.
Thank you. About 6 years ago, I met a 65-year-old Hindu in Dhaka, Bangladesh. He had taken a bus and traveled 9 hours to meet 2 Hindu leaders who had traveled all the way from Washington, D.C. And in an hour-long conversation with me, in which he spent half the time weeping, he described what the Hindu community, 20 million in numbers, in Bangladesh is going through and has gone through in the last 70 years. That's when I came to realize the magnitude and the weight of responsibility that rests upon the American Hindus like ourselves. And here I echo Vindhya, who also described a similar anecdote from her life experience. American Hindus, a community that claims to be the wealthiest and the most educated of the minority communities in this great country. A community that takes pride in counting its technocrats and Fortune 500 CEOs. A community that rules the spelling bees and the Ivy League robotic clubs. Yet, also a community that punches way, way below its weight when it comes to its voice being heard in the corridors of power and politics. Despite having our CEOs in Google and Microsoft and whatnot, the 6 million Hindu Americans could not get either of the presidential candidates to have one web page dedicated to addressing the issues of the community in this presidential election. Every other major religion had a web page. While we rightly take pride, and this was mentioned in the beginning of the event today, in the roles of icons like Swami Vivekananda and Henry David Thoreau, in influencing American innovation and its legacy of civil disobedience, a century and some later, the American Hindu neither has a voice in the public square nor a seat at the table of power. Our leaders who do have a seat at the table of power, and you know who they are, have been compromised. They have been compromised by other better organized identity groups. These groups have used intersectional envelopment to completely digest the Hindu under the South Asian, brown, people of color, or some other such identity, what have you. Now, that is not where the problem is. In fact, intersectionality is the way of the future in a world of competing agendas and deconstructed identities. The problem lies in the fact that the Hindu is now the shared target of this intersectional agenda peddlers. A low-hanging punching bag, if I can say so. And that is not the worst part. Steadily and in an organized manner, it is your children who are being conditioned to do the punching. So tonight, we have only one reason to be here, to make sure that HinduPACT is empowered to change this untenable status quo. As mentioned earlier by many of our speakers, HinduPACT plans to fulfill a critical role in providing the research and the advocacy platform to cover a big portion of the ideological spectrum in the American political mind space. This space has so far been unreachable to the Hindu community because there are many other groups which are occupying certain other ideological mind spaces. HinduPACT will ensure that your children and their children and their children have a voice in the public square as Hindus. HinduPACT hopes to see a seat at the table of power for you, not just for your children, not just for the Hindus of America, But for that 65-year-old Bangladeshi Hindu and millions of other Hindus like him from Pakistan, from Malaysia, from Nepal, from Indonesia, the Caribbeans, the African continent, and of course from India as well, who carry the same hope that this 65-year-old man carried with him when he met me in Dhaka. Because if we Hindus do not have a seat at this table of power, rest assured, we will be on their menu. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Utsavji. Before I conclude, I just want to thank our media partners once again. They are Diya TV, diyaTVUSA.com, Tag TV, tagtv.info, and Bharat FM, bharatfm.com. I hope you've had an amazing evening full of discussion and discourse, and you come away inspired. As we can see, there is so much work to be done, but I think this is the first step that we have taken this evening, and it's so important to keep going. We are such a rich and educated community, and I think it's time for us to step up and really put our money where our mouth is, and truly make our voices heard. It's incredibly important before it's too late. So thank you again for tuning in. Please go to the link and donate. Also donate your time, energy, resources, spread awareness. It all counts. It all helps. This all of this affects you whether you think it does or not. So I'm honored to host this evening for you all. Thank you to all the panelists, to the moderator, to Dr. J, to Ajayji, and VHPA and HinduPACT. So hope you had a wonderful evening. We will leave you with some amazing music to close out the night. But please, we love to hear from you, and we'll join you on all our social media portals and the Hindu Lounge, and many initiatives and shows that we have organized for you. So have a wonderful and safe evening. Dhanyavad. Thank you.
So I'll present few songs. पलक बुहारू आगरो राणी सा पधरा घूमर रमवाणी आप पधारो सा आओ जी आओ घूमरडी खिलबाने पधारो सा घूमरडी खिलबान बलम थारो गुरर गुरर गुरराव आज मारो जीवड़ो घणो हिचकावे ओ घबरावे मन में भावे मारो बदलो पुट मन भावे चमक चम बाजे बाइल बाजे बाइसा खेले चमक चमक घुंघरा बाजे आओ सा घूमरडी खिलबाने आओ सा घूमरडी खिलबाने कनक प्रीत के सर पे ओढ़ कर घूमर घूमर घूमे हाँ घूमर घूमर घूमे हो नल करीत सब जग के छोड़ कर घूमर घूमर घूमे भर के भोला वाले ठाट घूमर 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 घूमे रे घूमर घूमर घूमे रे वैसा घूमर घूमे रे हरे जगमगाया, तारों भरी हो गई मारी सारी काली रात भर के, ढोला वाले ठाट घूमर 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 घूमे रे, घूमर घूमर घूमे रे वैसा घूमर घूमे रे। हमारी सारी काया बोले, ढोला जी की छाया ओले, मन का घूमर जब भी डोले, सूनेपन में बेला फड़के, ढोला वाले ठाट घूमर 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 घूमे रे, घूमर घूमर घूमे रे वैसा घूमर घूमे रे। And the last song for tonight is the song that I have sung in Bajirao Mastani, which is Albela Sajan. And the fun part is that I also got to sing the Telugu version of this song. So I'm a Maharashtrian, but there was an instructor who taught us Telugu. So please, the people who speak Telugu, please forgive me if I make any mistakes in the pronunciation. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to sing the first antara in Hindi and the second one in Telugu. Okay, so just a moment. अलबेला सजन आयो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे, मोरा अति मन सुख पायो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे, मोरा अति मन सुख पायो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे। सारे ग सारे पा, सारे ग सारे धा, सारे ग सारे नी, चौक पुराओ मंगल गाओ, चौक पुराओ मंगल गाओ, अति मन सुख पायो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे, मोरा अति मन सुख पायो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे, अलबेला सजन आयो रे। नित्य विजयतकु भाग्य विधातकु, नित्य विजयतकु भाग्य विधातकु, गगन में कीर्ति पताका, साटी कोटि लेने लेरु यंदका, जय भेरी विजय गीतिका, जय भेरी विजय गीतिका, प्रिय स्वागत मन्नदि वेडुका, सजन आयोरी मोरा अति मन सुख पायोरी अलबेला सजन आयोरी अलबेला सजन आयोरी धन्यवाद. थैंक यू सो मच हिंदू पैक्ट एंड विश्व हिंदू परिषद. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Thank you. Namaste.